What's going on, everybody? C4 here. Welcome back to the 32-team 7-round mock draft series. And today, we're going to be taking a look at the team that holds the 11th pick in the first round. And that is the Cincinnati Bengals, who, my God, going into day 3, the Bengals pretty much own day 3. I think they're the most picks day 3 out of any team. So it was actually pretty difficult to draft for this team because, I mean, there are some position of needs, clearly. But with that many draft picks, that is just like, it's, you know, they have an abundance of picks, and I feel like for one of the biggest gambles, probably the second biggest gamble as a head coaching hire in Zac Taylor coming over from the Rams. He was their QB coach. I think I'd probably put Cliff Kingsbury a little bit below him, but still an incredibly risky hire. But I don't think there's going to be too much complaints around Cincinnati Bengal fans because clearly anybody but Marvin Lewis at this point was the mentality for this fan base going forward. At least you got an exciting hire in Zac Taylor, and hopefully, you know, there's a glimmer of hope that he can take and develop Andy Dalton and make him a very, I mean, what is Andy Dalton? I kind of think he is slightly underrated. I know Bengal fans won't say that. Most Bengal fans probably want to move on from him, but I think a guy like Zac Taylor could be a great thing for Andy Dalton. So I'm going to tell you right now, I have seen a common trend among mock drafts that they do draft a quarterback. You are not going to see that here today. I'm going more so with Zac Taylor trying to develop Andy Dalton. So at pick number 11, I'm selecting Devin White, linebacker from LSU. It's a change in the guard at the linebacking core for Cincinnati Bengals, moving on from Vontaze Burfict. And, you know, even before Vontaze Burfict was off the roster, I think now he's on the Raiders, it was going to be a big offseason to change the linebacking core. It was the weakness coming in. It's even more of a weakness by moving on from their most talented linebacker. And when you look at a guy like Devin White, I have said on record he's a top 5, top 10 talent in this year's draft class, and I still remain that. While he may not be a complete linebacker like we have seen with, you know, maybe Roquan Smith, maybe Leighton Vander Esch, I do think what he does better than anybody else in this draft class. And as long as the Cincinnati Bengals don't misuse him, if they just say you're going to be our in-the-box linebacker, you're going to affect the run game, we're going to, you know, not put you in an area to fail by, hey, try covering, you know, prolific tight ends. You know what I'm saying? Devin White has a very legitimate shot to be a defensive rookie of the year candidate. I think he's walking in there on the Cincinnati Bengals as linebacker 1. But that's not saying much because they have debatably the weakest linebacking core in the National Football League. But Devin White at pick number 11 is going to be a popular pick here for the Bengals fans. And I don't think you can mess this one up at pick number 11. They could potentially look at the offensive line, but I want to look at this team right now. The fact that Devin White is still on the board at 11, that is what we like to say a Mark McGuire dinger of a draft pick. Going into the second round at pick 42, I have them drafting Rock Ya-Sin, cornerback from Temple. He had an absolutely huge combine. For a guy that has, you know, relatively low experience at the position, he was a transfer to Temple last year, only played 1 year of NCAA Div 1. He has a very, very high IQ. He's an aggressive corner, very, very strong, very, very powerful, willing blocker. The kind of mentality that you want to bring to your secondary. When you look at Cincinnati, they need to find Will Jackson's long-term partner, and I don't think it is going to be the vastly overpaid Dre Kirkpatrick, who was the number 96 ranked cornerback last year from Pro Football Focus. He carries an $8 million cap savings, I think this year actually, and next year. So really, it is a ugly contract for the former 2012 first rounder out of Alabama. And when you look at the rest of the corners, not much there. I mean, Darqueze Dennard, I don't think is really in their long-term plans. They brought him back on a 1-year, $5 million deal to be their starting nickel. I mean, the former first-round pick from 2014, another failed investment. I mean, he is what he is. He's like an average nickel corner. I still think they look to address that position. But as far as an outside corner, I mean, you can do a lot better than Dre Kirkpatrick. I think a guy like Rock Ya-Sin comes into a situation where he won't have to be thrown to the wolves and start right away. He can develop. He can work his way in as part of a rotation, get him in different sets. I think ultimately, though, you look towards next year in 2020 to be the long-term fixture alongside Will Jackson there in that secondary for the Bengals. Because really, looking next year, Dre Kirkpatrick should be out the books. Dennard's most likely gone, and your cornerbacks are William Jackson and Darius Phillips. Not good. Bring Rock Ya-Sin, start forward thinking, and get a big-time playmaker for your secondary. Going into the third round, pick 72, I was selecting Vosean Joseph, linebacker from Florida. Again, trying to rebuild this linebacking core. Vosean Joseph, very aggressive cover linebacker, sideline-to-sideline ability. For his size, he's 225. He is a big-time hitter, a tone setter. You know, what you're losing in Vontaze Burfict, you can get that back in Devin White and Vosean Joseph tenfold. And I think, you know, you look at last year's linebacking core for the Bengals, you have Preston Brown, Jordan Evans, Vontaze Burfict, Vincent Ray, not a good linebacking core. To go from that into the next offseason, you have Devin White, Vosan Joseph, and you're going to hope the third-round pick last year in 2018, Malik Jefferson out of Texas, can put it all together. I mean, that is a promising linebacking core with a whole lot of upside and very, very athletic. I think that is exactly what the Bengals need to do this offseason. Just completely rebuild that linebacking core and get great value in the first and third rounds. Moving into the fourth round at pick 110, you bring in Zach Taylor. You get this offensive guru, if you will. Give him, the X player, and not necessarily running the X wide receiver, but just the X player on the offensive position, the player that is really polarizing amongst draft scouts, and I think almost every single person wants on their team just because what can he develop into, and that is Jalen Hurd. I'm going to classify him as an offensive weapon from Baylor. He is like I said, the perfect player for Zach Taylor to develop. Scouts pretty much have him as a consensus most upside developmental wide receiver in this draft class. In the fourth round is where those guys tend to go. He's 6'4", 230 pounds wide receiver. In 2015, he was the starting running back for the Volunteers, where he had 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns. And then he moved to Baylor, transferred to Baylor, and moved to a tight end wide receiver type hybrid and showed incredibly natural hands for that position. Enough so that everyone's just like, why wasn't he playing wide receiver sooner? So with a guy like that big, he's like tight end. He can play wide receiver, just an offensive weapon, move him all over the field. And in space, he's an absolute problem with the ball. He has natural characteristics of a running back with ball carrier vision, looking for contact, running through tackles, and almost in general looking for contact across the middle of the field. And I really do compare to a weapon that the Rams have that I actually think is kind of underrated in Gerald Everett. They brought in Gerald Everett, who's that kind of hybrid mold too. Undersized tight end, will play tight end, and more so like a glorified wide receiver. I think Hurd is much more likely to be a wide receiver. But when you look at the Bengals, they don't got a whole lot here beyond AJ Green and Tyler Boyd. You got John Ross. You're still gonna hope on him, even though there's rumors that he was on the trade block. But there you got three. You have you have an outside guy in AJ Green. You have a slot player in Tyler Boyd. You have John Ross, who's a question mark on the outside. And then from that, you just got a bunch of guys. Josh Malone, Auden Tate, Cody Core. It is what it is. And then when you look at the tight end position, they got Tyler Eifert back on a one-year deal. He just cannot stay healthy. CJ Uzuma's an average tight end at best. So I feel like a guy in Jalen Hurd brings you that potential. Let's see what Zach Taylor can do. Almost like the gauge. Not only do you want to see what he can do with Andy Dalton, but what can he do in terms of developing really, really niche players? And given the fact that, he's been around an offense that has almost an exactly, carbon copy of what Jalen Hurd can bring in Gerald Everett, I think it's a nice little value pick and a good utility weapon for the Bengals offense going forward. Very much so, kind of like Giovanni Bernard. Going into the fifth round at pick 149, I'm selecting Daniel Wise, defensive tackle from Kansas. It is time to start planning for life after Geno Atkins. He's 31, 32 in that age. Still productive, but, you look at the depth there at the defensive tackle spot, it's, it's all right. Could be better. They got Andrew Billings, who's more of a nose tackle, not really a Geno Atkins replacement. Ryan Glasgow, a fourth-round pick in 2017, is probably that guy for now. But Daniel Wise here in the fifth round is a great value pick, considering the strength of the draft class. If it was a little bit weaker, he could be as high of a third-round pick. But still sitting here in the fifth round, it is a nice rotational move here for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think a guy like Daniel Wise can contribute right away as a rotational defensive line as a rookie and build from there. He's very, very good at stuffing the run. He also has shown ability to get after the passer. In last 2 years at Kansas, 28 tackles for loss, 10 sacks at that defensive tackle spot. I think he has the upside to be a future starter in the 3 technique of that defensive line. But again, start planning for the future. Very much like the Rocky Sin pick here in Daniel Wise in the fifth round. Going to the sixth round, pick 183, finally trying to address the offensive line. I know it's pretty much the other position outside of the linebacking core, but I wasn't going to have them reach. Pretty much second, third, fourth round, there wasn't a tackle or a guard I felt comfortable picking for the Cincinnati Bengals. So we're going to try and get some value here. Guys with very high upside. And it starts in the sixth round at 183 with Mitch Hyatt, offensive tackle from Clemson. Longtime Clemson starting offensive tackle. He is very good in pass protection, has upside for a limited athlete. I think he could be better suited as interior somewhere along the, obviously a guard, but he's an insanely high football IQ. You have a lot to work with and a very solid floor, and I think he has a very legitimate shot if he gets drafted to at least stick on the back end of this roster as a potential swing tackle, but best case scenario, challenge Bobby Hart, who got a very confusing contract this offseason for that right tackle spot. Going into the next sixth-round pick at 198, I'm selecting Jimmy Moreland, cornerback from James Madison. You've probably heard me talk about him quite a bit here on the channel. He's my favorite small school prospect in this year's draft class, and I think he will go a little bit late because he's that small school prospect, but I do think he has day one starting nickel potential. Obviously, they brought back DeMarcus Christmas on a one-year deal. You have Darius Phillips, the 5th-round pick last year, who also could play that role. But I think Darius Phillips probably is going to more so develop into like their special team weapon, if you will. But a guy like Jimmy Moreland, man, he has unreal production at James Madison. The last 2 years, he has 12 interceptions. When he gets the ball in his hands, kind of reminds me a little bit of a Ed Reed. It feels like every single time he gets it, he wants to try to get a pick six. And like I said, he's a prototypical nickel. And I think in terms of long-term vision for the secondary, DeMarcus Christmas, not really in their long-term plans. Get a guy like Jimmy Moreland to stick on the back end of this roster, and you get a lot of upside. And I personally think he could emerge as a surprising pick for the Bengals this year that could start right away. Very similar to how I predicted, even though it was different scenarios because he wasn't a late-round pick, but I thought Jesse Bates last year was an outstanding pick and would be a day-one starter, and the rest is history. Another 6th-round pick at 210. I was selecting Nate Herbig, offensive guard from Stanford, another offensive lineman, this time in the interior. And I know we're trying to stress value with a lot of these picks because a lot of them I do like because that's why it's my mock draft. But I have Nate Herbig. I think he might be the best value offensive guard in the draft. I mean, for as much tape as I have been able to sustain watching offensive linemen, this is more so looking at Bryce Love 2 years ago. Nate Herbig is an outstanding power blocker, and I think not enough people are sleeping on him. I thought for sure he'd be 3rd, 4th round grade, and I see most mock drafts had him heading into undrafted free agency and stuff like that. That is ridiculous. I think Nate Herbig could come in, especially if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for a guy that come in on guard, challenge what do you got right now at right guard? You got John Miller coming over from the Bills, Alex Redmond penciled in there. You got Clint Bowling, who's on a kind of fat contract. A guy like Nate Herbig, I think absolutely can challenge for the final 53, and he's an absolute powerhouse in the run game at guard. I think there's a whole lot of upside there for the Cincinnati Bengals. Another 6th-round pick, 211. I was liking Travis Homer, running back from Miami. Pretty good value here. I got a lot of running backs slipping in my draft class this year. I think Travis Homer's an underrated runner. Had a really good combine, ran a 4.48. He can catch. I think more so looking at the running back room here for the Bengals, you got a new regime here. You got a new regime. It's not the Marvin Lewis, if you're a criminal, you get arrested, it's still fine. I mean, Mark Walton had some off-the-field issues this offseason. He got arrested. I wouldn't be surprised to see him cut ties because he did have some issues in college. It could be a persistent issue that it's a headache that Zach Taylor and company do not want to have on their books. So they could be very much in the market for a running back. And why not get a guy, I think, on day 3, late day 3, is going to be an exceptional value pick here in Travis Homer. Again, the word of the day here for the Bengals with all of these day 3 picks is exceptional to great value, steal, home run, everything in between. Moving into the last 6th-round pick at 213, I was selecting Isaiah Prince, offensive tackle from Ohio State. Again, this is just more so me regurgitating what the scouting community is saying. He's a high ceiling, outstanding athlete at tackle. He could challenge for the swing tackle spot right away, but he needs a good offensive line coach that can coach him up and develop him. Maybe that's kind of a question mark from the old regime of the Bengals. You haven't seen a lot of development from their tackles. Cedric Abuye, Jake Fisher are definitely the most two notable ones, but hopefully this new regime here with Zach Taylor, all these innovative guys on the offensive side of the ball can develop these late round prospects, and a guy like Isaiah Prince has a very legitimate shot given his athletic ability. And then finish up the draft in the 7th round at pick 223. I was selecting DeMarcus Christmas, defensive tackle from Florida State. Again, more rotational depth on the interior of the defensive line. He's a very good run defender. This could be, again, maybe a little bit low for some people, especially if you're a Florida State fan. I've seen them go as high as the 5th round, but for me, he was still available in the 7th. And again, kind of like the pick of Daniel Weiss. Need a little bit more depth there on the defensive line. And I think just more so value because the defensive tackle is so stacked. The fact that you can get a guy like DeMarcus Christmas in the 7th round is too good to pass up here for the Bengals. So there you go, guys. That is my 7th-round mock draft for the Bengals. Bengal fans, let me know in the comment section below how you like this mock draft. Do you agree or disagree with the picks? As always, if it's your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button, smash the like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.